Ahoy there, landlubbers and sea enthusiasts. Galloway Bevins was only 7 years old when he overheard his neighbor ask, "Is your dad still out on the rig? There's a massive storm coming." This moment would forever mark the day his father, along with 83 others, lost their lives on the Ocean Ranger oil rig. The deadly Ocean Ranger disaster. Oil rigs are constantly at risk from massive waves, fires, and explosions. Workers face danger daily, and any accident could lead to disaster. Is there any hope of escaping a rig during an emergency? And who would be held responsible if something went wrong? On February 15th, 1982, Galloway's father, Thomas Bevins, was working on the Ocean Ranger rig off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada. This was where huge oil reserves were found in 1979 in the Hibernia oil field. The workers were drilling special wells to map the field's size. Built in 1976, the Ocean Ranger was the largest of its kind at the time, measuring 121 meters long, 80 meters wide, and 103 meters tall. The Ocean Ranger oil rig was built with worker safety in mind. Its design featured large ballast pontoons underwater, not above it, keeping the structure steady by partially submerging it. This setup kept the rig stable against waves and wind, preventing it from tipping or wobbling. February 14th, 1982, was expected to be an ordinary day on the rig, with no signs of trouble ahead, or so it seemed. At 8 a.m., the crew received a warning of severe weather on the way, with waves predicted to reach up to 11 meters. As a precaution, the team paused drilling, disconnected the drill pipe, and secured it to wait out the storm. However, the Atlantic winds hit harder than expected, gusting at 190 kilometers per hour and causing 20-meter-high waves. The storm raged all day, and by 1 a.m. on February 15th, the Ocean Ranger sent out a distress call saying the platform was tilting and unstable. Nearby, the C4 Highlander vessel was contacted for backup. What seemed like a standard safety step quickly turned into an emergency. A massive wave hit, breaking one of the platform's windows and flooding the ballast control room. The equipment failed, and seawater rushed in, likely triggering a short circuit that opened the rig's valves, making the structure impossible to stabilize. At 1:30 a.m., the Ocean Ranger's last message went out as the crew prepared the lifeboats. Neighboring platforms dispatched their boats, but the raging storm made it almost impossible to get close. By 2:21 a.m., the C4 Highlander was near the site and spotted a damaged lifeboat. As they attempted to secure it, a tether snapped, capsizing the boat with all its passengers in the water. The brutal storm prevented any further rescue. The Ocean Ranger and Deepwater Horizon disaster. 7-year-old Galloway Bevins was overwhelmed with worry as family and friends filled his home, talking in hushed tones about a search for survivors at sea. No one told him directly, but he knew from their voices that his father might not be coming back. Despite search and rescue efforts in the following days, no survivors were found from the Ocean Ranger disaster. Only a few empty lifeboats, life rafts, and pieces of flotation devices were recovered. All 84 workers on the rig perished in the storm. But sometimes the threat isn't the surrounding ocean, it's in the oil itself. On April 20th, 2010, Jason Anderson was working on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico. Having been with the rig since its launch in 2001, he had become a senior tool pusher. That day, he was preparing for a transfer to another rig, but decided to stay a bit longer to say goodbye to his co-workers. Little did he know, it would be a deadly decision. Transocean, the company operating the rig, had tasked the team with drilling through rock and inserting a metal pipe, then sealing it with concrete. Finally, they would carefully detach the Deepwater Horizon rig from the well and replace it with a smaller one for oil extraction. Problems began as early as the drilling stage. High pressure at a depth of 610 meters forced a pause, and although the workers were supposed to insert a short concrete pipe to prevent well collapse, the company decided on a longer one, believing it would prevent leaks. To stabilize this longer pipe, the area around it had to be filled with concrete. But Transocean rushed the testing and used low-quality materials, leaving spaces where liquids and gases could seep through. As the crew prepared to detach the Deepwater Horizon from the well, they ran tests to check for gas leaks. Unfortunately, they misinterpreted the data and missed signs of gas in the well. When gas gets into the well, it rapidly expands, surging up the pipe and leading to a massive explosion. And that's exactly what happened at Deepwater Horizon. Explosions, survival, and desperation. The explosion on the Deepwater Horizon was not just powerful, but a horrifying spectacle visible from miles away, blazing so brightly that it stunned anyone who saw it. Inside the rig, the workers had no time to prepare and were immediately thrown into a scene of chaos. Many rushed to the lifeboats, thinking it was their only chance, only to find the air inside filled with smoke, so thick it choked them. In sheer terror, one young crew member, Andrea Fatis, captured everyone's thoughts by crying out, "We're going to die." Others were paralyzed with fear, unable to move as flames surrounded them. Some, in their desperation, jumped off the rig from a height of nearly 60 feet, landing in the oily, treacherous waters below. Andrea was lucky. Rescuers managed to pull him out of the water, bringing him to safety. But not everyone was so fortunate. Crane operator Arendale Birkin was thrown by a shockwave, falling 50 feet and losing his life upon impact. Ultimately, 11 people perished, and the disaster didn't stop there. As the flames burned on, oil began spilling uncontrollably into the Gulf of Mexico, causing one of the worst environmental catastrophes the United States has ever seen. The spill lasted months, devastating marine life, coastlines, and livelihoods. Tragically, disasters like these have struck the oil industry more than once. On March 27, 1980, another terrible incident occurred on a large floating platform in the North Sea called the Alexander L. Keeland. At the time, 23-year-old Jan Jansen was on board, a worker among many who lived on the platform while working nearby. That evening, fierce winds created towering waves, some reaching 40 feet. Jansen was watching a movie in a small cinema below deck when a massive wave hit, followed by a series of explosive sounds. 5 of the platform's 6 heavy anchor cables had snapped, and within seconds, the entire rig started tipping over. Jansen reached the deck, braving the icy 5 degrees Celsius wind and sharp winter air. As he fought against the cold, he managed to find a lifeboat, but when he stopped to grab a life jacket, the boat broke loose, crashing onto the deck and killing nearly everyone inside. Everywhere around him, people were desperately trying to escape. Some were climbing down the walls of the platform, holding on to any surface they could find. But the platform kept tipping until it was fully submerged in the frigid sea. Thrown into the water as the rig sank, Jansen struggled to keep himself afloat. With the last of his energy, he found a damaged, waterlogged boat and held on, pulling 4 others to safety beside him. For hours, they clung to that unstable boat, surrounded by the bodies of friends and co-workers lost to the disaster. They were battered by 50-foot waves and freezing winds until, by sheer luck, they spotted rubber rafts drifting from a nearby drilling rig. Jansen and his group climbed aboard, helping 8 more survivors scramble onto the rafts. There, they waited, tossed by the storm, hoping that rescue would come before the merciless sea took them too. Survival, sacrifice, and lessons learned. In the early hours of the Alexander L. Keeland disaster, hope was a rare glimmer amid an ocean of chaos. Survivors clung to their lives as brutal waves and freezing temperatures took a toll. When a helicopter finally appeared, the weary survivors signaled with whatever they had, yet the helicopter kept flying by. It was only after several excruciating passes that a lifeline was thrown, rescuing Jan and 89 others from the jaws of death. Tragically, this victory was bittersweet. 123 crew members had perished. Despite having lifeboats and rafts for everyone on board, most were inaccessible due to the platform's sharp tilt and rapid sinking. Later investigations discovered a seemingly tiny fault, a 6mm crack in a support brace, that compromised the platform's entire structure, leading to its collapse. This tragic incident led to stricter lifeboat and evacuation protocols and is remembered as Norway's worst offshore disaster. Sometimes, it's human error that triggers catastrophe. On July 6, 1988, a series of seemingly minor missteps on the Piper Alpha rig set the stage for one of history's deadliest oil rig disasters. While workers were repairing a critical safety valve, they left a temporary metal disc cover over the system to continue the process. A permit was completed to warn the next shift not to use the pump, but in a tragic twist of fate, this permit went unnoticed. Later that day, the working pump failed, and a crew, unaware of the repair, activated the secondary pump. This caused gas to build up and break through the disc cover, creating a massive leak. The gas caught fire, resulting in an explosion so fierce that flames consumed the rig. The crew was faced with intense heat and flames blocking access to lifeboats, while fierce winds made helicopter rescue nearly impossible. In the thick of the disaster, Charles Hay, a crew member aboard the rescue ship Silver Pit, found himself heading straight into a literal inferno. As they neared the blazing platform, he described feeling as though he was staring into hell itself, with ruptured pipes turning the platform into a field of burning torches. Despite the dangers, Hay's team continued their approach, determined to save whoever they could. They pulled 61 survivors from the sea, risking their own lives to rescue those trapped in the water. Sadly, 165 people lost their lives, marking it as the deadliest oil rig disaster on record and devastating 10% of the UK's oil production. Financially, the accident cost billions, but the human loss far outweighed any monetary cost. This tragedy forever changed industry standards, ensuring rigorous checks and balanced safety measures to prevent similar accidents. These oil rig disasters raise haunting questions. Even with pay reaching $200,000 for experienced rig workers, is the job worth the risk? Oil rig work offers an attractive paycheck, but demands its workers face risks most people can barely imagine. Would you take a job like this, knowing the stakes? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to explore more about the world's most dangerous professions.